Well, the reason was narco trafficking. And now Nick Maduro has been pulled out of power by the U.S. And really, that's the last I heard of narco trafficking. Since then, mainly the discussion has been oil. And so when it comes to that topic here at TPL, we always head to the realm of Dan McTeague. Thanks so much for joining us, Dan. And hopefully adding some depth to this that we're only getting in sound bites right now. Before our discussion began today, I pointed out, and we had this discussion, there's not many people that are experts in this country on oil like you. So I'm delighted to have you with us. Thanks so much.
Great to be here. Thanks very much. And I was wondering what the new year would look like. I didn't have to wait very long to figure it out. We were going to be very busy, and it all comes down to two words. Canada's big mistake, and net zero, but I'll explain that later.
Yeah, okay. Well, that's a great place for us to land in this discussion for sure. One of the things that I'd love to do out of the gate is kind of paint a picture for Canadians. We've all heard the news. We all understand what's going on. I'm not entirely sure that I understand the legality of what the U.S. has done here or what the effects will be. But as I point out, Dan, this really what we're talking about here has gone from narco trafficking safety quickly to oil, as this morning we're hearing that oil is coming out of Venezuela and headed to the U.S., almost in the form of reparations or something. I don't even understand that. Can you give us a more rounded picture on where we stand right now with this entire problem?
Yeah, sure. Venezuela, largest supplier of, or the largest reserves of oil in the world, over 3 billion provable barrels. That's a lot of barrels if you consider the world's consumption is about, in the vicinity of 100 million barrels a day. So on its own, I mean, you could see how their reserves or proven reserves could last and keep the world going for a very long time if they had to. But what's critical is understanding the role Venezuela played prior to the takeover by Hugo Chavez back 15, 20 years ago, and where that industry stood. Venezuela had the cheapest, largest, plentiful abundance of oil that it exported to the world, but mostly to the United States. They would, operate through their own national company and several other companies, get product to the United States Gulf Coast. Now, why is that important? Why is Houston important? Why is Texas and, Louisiana, Alabama, that region of the United States so important from an oil perspective? Not just because of the drilling and where their proximity to West Texas and the original Texas and Oklahoma drills of 150, 120 years ago. It's also home to the refineries that produce half of all the fuel consumed in the United States. And just to make this more interesting, the United States is still the largest consumer of oil in the world. It's not China. It's not India. It's the United States. So access to the U.S. market is critical, not just for Americans, but also for countries that want to, improve their economies. And Venezuela did much of that by getting most of its oil to the U.S. Gulf Coast, 3.5 million barrels a day. That fell to about 1 million barrels in terms of production, and none of that went to the United States after it imposed sanctions on the socialists that had basically stolen the assets that were owned by American companies, but not limited to American companies, but such as Exxon, not a small company, ConocoPhillips, not a small company, and messed around even with Chevron, the effect of which was to reduce and pretty much eliminate Venezuela's exports of its oil to the U.S. Gulf Coast. In the meantime, little country to the north named Canada, he said, we can get that oil to you, the same heavy oil that you need. And why is heavy oil? I know the people on the left like to disparage it. No heavy oil, no diesel.
Yeah,
no diesel.
It seems like
so
we seem to be one of the biggest suppliers of heavy oil for diesel, potentially in the world.
Exactly. And so, I mean, everybody has various slates of oil. Canada has a little bit, but we have heavier oil. And people who deride it don't really understand that its properties are that you can produce anything with heavy oil. But most notably, for the purposes of economies being functional, diesel is the global workhorse, and you can't make it using light, tight shale oil. And you don't want it coming from countries that have, pretty dodgy reputations on human rights and on environment. And so Canada became a real obvious no-brainer. And how they did it, Mike, was the pipelines that went from Houston or went to Texas and then made their way north into Oklahoma to what's a place called Cushing. Cushing, Oklahoma is the hub for West Texas Intermediate. When you hear oil price, well, it's always WTI, at least for us in North America. So a critical spot that got most of its oil, certainly most of its heavy oil, from Venezuela. That changed. And over the period, I would say 210 to about 218, 216, we reversed a number of pipelines south of Illinois so that oil wouldn't be flowing from U.S. Gulf Coast because there was none left all the way up to Illinois. Instead, it was Canadian oil going to Illinois, then making its way, and then some through the existing Keystone pipeline, right down into the U.S. Gulf Coast, such that 900,000 barrels of Canadian oil that didn't have a market before are now finding their way to the U.S. Gulf Coast. About 2.4 million barrels of what we sell to the United States goes to the U.S. Midwest. And so we have a pretty large presence in the United States. What worried me most on Sunday after I heard about the removal of Maduro was the reality that we had to now accept, and that was that we are going to see a resumption of Venezuelan oil into the U.S. market, displacing Canadian oil and making a complete mockery of the fact that we've spent 10 years dithering, navel gazing, and you really call it what it is, thumb sucking over the idea that somehow we had to be the world's international Boy Scouts and Girl Guides when it came to climate, such that we had to decarbonize our own oil. No other country does this, but no, Canada has to decarbonize its oil in order to be able to sell it because we want to be virtually signaling. Unfortunately, we're about to have our backside sent to us because we could lose that market, and we could lose it in a much shorter period of time than so-called experts are telling us.
You raise a good point. It seems like in many ways Canada finds itself virtue signaling around the world, whether it's and you know what, I'll take heat for this, but I am, and this is a great example with oil, but in many ways we're out there acting like way too big for our britches in the global theater, whether it's peacekeeping or resources, fuels and gas, all of this sort of stuff. We tend to want to be the most virtuous out there at our own expense. Now, this is something I just started to understand. If the price of oil changes even slightly, Albertans, for example, suffer horribly. The price per barrel in Canada is a significant marker, and it has a big impact on us. Can we talk a little bit about that with this new potential oil arriving from Venezuela?
Yeah, so that oil might come for free, or to a large extent to be money, rather in the form of reparations that Venezuela, or at least its oil, will have to cover for the theft, if you will, of the socialists in Venezuela who stole the property belonging to Exxon and Chevron and ConocoPhillips and a host of others, including companies from India, some from South Korea. Those are much smaller, but the claim is that if it's several billions of dollars, these companies may very well be able to get that back by not by demanding the Venezuelans pay for it, because they can't, but by getting, other than royalties going back to the government to sustain it, that they may be able to get this at a much cheaper price. Now, I just want to make people understand something. Canadian oil cannot be produced. It cannot be made possible for under $40 a barrel. We're at 44 right now. So,
and if it's coming in at zero in the U.S., if it's coming from Venezuela at zero, we're not competitive at all for at least a period of time. And it seems to me that during that period of time, new arrangements for that oil could easily be made out of Venezuela under new terms with the U.S.
Precisely. And we now know that Venezuela was only able to put out about 1 million, not even quite 1 million barrels a day. But as of yesterday, the only country that was picking up most of that oil was China. It was told to basically pack up and get out, and the contract was shut down. So there's 1 million barrels now sitting out there. Guess where that's going? And it's going to go there a lot sooner than the 10 years. Some of the experts who've been around this for 5 or 6 years and have suddenly understood this. I've been to Venezuela. I've been in the United States. I've worked in this industry since 1995, both as member of parliament and in the real sense from the consumer's perspective. But $40 is the number I'm looking at. Canadian oil dropped to below 40. You're going to start to see some shut-ins, and you're going to start to see revenues drop, and you're going to start to see, not just for the Alberta government, you're going to start to see that impact the Canadian government. And so we've been pretending, prancing around, playing this idea that we can somehow do without oil and our economy will just flourish and all this money will come in and there'll be investments on green energy and all sorts of other nonsense. After 10 years of that, We are going to see a much higher level of debt, federal, because of course the revenues that come in from the oil and gas sector are substantial. Net 25, $30 billion every year on what we currently have. And if that what we currently have is about to be compromised or lessened, then it's going to have a direct impact on the finances of the country, which means, of course, higher interest rates. It means a higher debt. It means a number of implications in terms of joblessness. And Canada becomes less attractive. You don't take my word on how less attractive we are, because it takes 138 Canadian pennies to buy $1 US. That's adding 35, 40% to the cost of everything. No wonder grocery prices are through the roof. No wonder we feel like we're losing this great battle. Why? Because we made a stupid move in 2015 to say we are going to shut ourselves in and we're going to become virtue signalers on something over net zero that has been extraordinarily damaging to Canada. We see the damage being done in Europe. It's far worse for Canadians who decided we're not going to build LNG, we're not going to build pipelines, we're going to block all of these things and basically cut our nose off to spite our faces. We have choked the golden goose, and now we're about to pay for it.
It seems to me that there's a lot of discussion of Carney says, "Oh, I've got an MOU for a pipeline." Net zero. Does it seem like we can at some point start to walk back from this? Have we virtue signaled too hard in the world to say, okay, we've got to open up new ways to access our resources? We need to, once you ring that bell, it's tough, really difficult to unring it.
Yeah, I mean, you can't unscramble eggs. I've been on this since 2017, 2018. I left Gas Buddy in the United States to be able to focus on where Canada was going, the deterioration of our standard of living, which is why affordable energy made so much sense. Drive up the price of energy, you see that an appreciable drop, not only the ability for people to make ends meet and pay for things, but also drive away the very one of the major engines of economic prowess that we have in this country. Net zero isn't just about a concept. It gave you the carbon taxes. The first one, which we suspended temporarily, the consumer carbon tax. We still have the clean fuel standard. By the way, gasoline's gone up 2 cents a liter. No one knows that because they don't follow it the way I do, but it's up 2 cents a liter. It's going to 20 cents a liter to displace the previous one. And we have the OBPS, the industrial carbon tax. Now, as far as the MOU is concerned, and of course we have, apart from net zero, the EV mandates. I worked at Toyota Canada Public Relations. I know exactly what was going to happen. I predicted these would be failures, colossal failures, once people realized what was involved, the cost, the shortcomings, the inefficiency, the unreliability, all of these things that they had to be massively subsidized by by our hard tax dollars, by people who could hardly make ends meet. It made no sense. It was a recipe to destroy the Canadian standard of living. It still is. The longer the Liberals and their buddies and the NDP and the Greens and the Bloc continue to cling to this, the less likely it is you're going to have a country that's going to be able to survive economically over the next decade. It's already
Dan, I don't know what you mean. We made beautiful battery plants, and we need to resource certain minerals to make those batteries, and also the companies are gone. The writing on the wall here. I mean, even a guy like myself could have seen this 3-4 years out, that if we are trying to replace what we naturally have and the access that we could easily have to resources in our own country, providing jobs, providing export at a better value, I'm surprised if the industry didn't also see that, and certainly the government. Dan, how do we get back into the oil game? Is there a road back that you can see?
There is, and it would be, if I were Prime Minister Dan McTagg tomorrow morning, I would tear up that stupid MOU and say you're not going to impose any more burdens on getting Canadian product to market, and you're going to use your federal authority to say the pipeline is approved now, based, of course, on Northern Gateway. Now, who's going to invest? Well, we now know in the past 72 hours, investment has pretty much dried up, or to a large extent been compromised by the fact that our dithering has given opportunities for new events to emerge geopolitically that have put us at a disposition. We paid $50 billion out of the taxpayers' pockets to build the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion because we had fruitcakes and nut jobs going around saying we should not be building pipelines and we should block pipelines. Right beside the existing pipeline, TMX, which has been there since 1953 with zero incidents. So look, we have snookered ourselves. Don't blame the rest of the world. But if you have a guy like Mark Carney, if I were a smart Mark Carney, I'd be going out saying to China, you just lost 800,000 barrels of oil. How about picking up some from us? That would create the investment and the climate that we would need to maybe fulfill the idea of rebuilding Northern Gateway. But as I said earlier, it takes resolve by the federal government. You're not going to get it from a bunch of liberals whose only support was, being a bunch of albozos who've gone and basically said, oh, we can spend our way into more debt in order to make this country work while killing the very sectors. And by the way, Mike, I don't want to be too ardent on this. I'm not just talking energy. I saw a stat this morning that showed that Canada's manufacturers have dropped to almost zero their investment in new equipment. No new equipment, no productivity, no economic gain. We are in a free fall. And the only way to stop it is to basically say the stupidity of 2015 and our obsession with net zero and wokeness and DEI has got to come to an end, or there will be no country.
It seems like an investment in oil in Canada right now is the kind of investment that you make in an underdog. It doesn't seem like a bright investment for many people on the heels of, oh, look, the American market, one of their biggest buyers is about to get free oil. It's heavily, I don't know how you feel about actually processing oil into the fuels here in Canada, but doesn't seem to be something we do. We send a lot of that to the States. It goes to Billings, as you point out, into the Midwest as well. I don't know if that's a solution for this, but the one thing that I do think is that as an investment in oil right now, Canada looks like a tough game.
Canada has the capital and has made the capital investments in refineries. Yes, we've shut down refineries. I dealt with that 25 years ago when I was a member of parliament. You might remember this little gem produced in, what year is that? 1998. So I wrote that on gasoline pricing. So I'm not new to this business, but refinery is not the issue. The irony is that where are you going to send your refined product if you still don't have pipelines to send it to?
That's true too.
I mean, a lot of people don't think, no wonder no one wants to make investments, but a lot of these refineries have bulked up. We have little pipelines that, like for instance, if you're in Winnipeg, all your gasoline comes from Saskatchewan, or even as far away as Edmonton. Much of my oil that I'm using here in Toronto, Ontario, Milton, Ontario, comes from out west through Line 5 through Michigan. So pipelines have been the solution. The fact that we have attacked them, that we have, as we say in French, ils ont ciblé, they actually targeted to prevent these things from being built, is nothing short of reckless, irresponsible, and a form of economic vandalism, the likes of which we're paying for today.
Take a look at Venezuela for me 3 years out, if you don't mind, Dan, in your mind. What do you see?
Venezuela's back to pumping 3 million barrels a day. Remember, it isn't about the decrepit nature of what Maduro did and what Chavez did. I mean, the biggest challenge Venezuela faces today in terms of production of oil is the takeaway. It's diluent. Now, like Canada, you have to mix it with lighter blends in order to make it flow better. The stuff that's in the Orinoco belt is heavy. It's more or less at the surface than what we have in Canada. It doesn't take steam to get it out in most cases. You have to upgrade it. And that's a very expensive process. The upgraders have not been kept to date, but they can be done so very quickly, given that the infrastructure is there. The fact that it needs to be rehabilitated is small potatoes when you consider the money's already there in terms of reparations these companies can take advantage of. But the two biggest obstacles, diluent, as I mentioned, can now be made possible. The United States can send it there and they can start getting a few 100,000 more barrels of oil a day. And that can happen in the next 6 months, if not sooner. And of course, the other one, sanctions, they're over. They're finished. Sanctioned oil is not going to the United States. Donald Trump, the president, announced last night he's getting 50 million barrels now purchased from Venezuela. It'll help Venezuelans, but it'll also help Americans. That oil coming to the United States means there's no longer need for Canadian oil. So well done, Canadian fanatics who've gone out and said no to Canadian oil. You may not like the product, but the product pays for your hospitals. It pays for your pensions. It pays for your social programs. And how do I know? Yeah, I spent some time both in cabinet and as a member of parliament for 18 years as a liberal, and I know how important this was. Why? When I wrote this report, you'll see it was embargoed to 1 p.m. Wednesday, June 10th, 1998. Both Chrétien and Martin came up to me. Martin is finance minister and Chrétien, nervous, said, what the heck do you have in that report? Because it was written by about 30 liberal members of parliament. I was chair. I said, it's all about the downstream. It's all about retail gasoline. Why the questions? And it was Martin who pulled me aside and said, Dan, We're producing and selling about 1 million barrels of oil a day. We can go to 2, maybe even 3 million barrels in the next few years. That's how we're going to pay down the debt. You remember in 1997, 1998,
Yes.
we were the country that was targeted by the IMF as being the honorary future members of its under its tutelage. You don't want to be in that position. That's what scared them. They recognize that you can't crap on the oil industry, like it or not. And I'm from Ontario, and I fought. I was there around long enough when I ran the National Energy Program, and when I was a young liberal. A Turk in the riding, if you will, working for the Liberals, Paul Cosgrove at the time, and I've got the receipts to prove it. God, I did a lot when I was young. Nevertheless,
you're not slowing down, Dan. I'll be honest with you.
it's too much. And I'm saying, look, the institutional memories of what's happened and what's taken place. When Paul Martin and Jean Chrétien said, we can't make ends meet without Alberta oil getting to global markets. At that time, 1 million, now today, 4 or 5 million. The threat that might be reduced back to 3 million, well, that's going to cost you and I, and we're going to see our deficit in this country blow up. Investments will walk away, jobs will be lost, and the effect will be cataclysmic. Now, someone's going to say, "Oh, it's only 3 or 4% of your GDP." I hear them all the time. Yeah, well, 70% of your economy is based on service. Nothing wrong with that. 30% has to produce to make that 70%. And if part of that 70% is civil servants, how the hell do you think you're going to keep your job, much less your pensions, if you don't have someone making revenue?
Our GDP keeps dropping below the line. We've seen it 6 times in the last 12 months. And it's all based on the manufacturing sector failing, the lack of production of our own resources and exports. It is a frightening experience to know, okay, one major resource that we could be tapping into with a market that's natural to us, we've just let it go. What should Canadians, in your mind, be saying to their politicians and to the federal government at this point to get it turned around? What is the one thing that would terrify politicians and our federal government into making us a better producer of our own resources?
You want to come after Donald Trump? You want to stop your El Bozo routine that you were engaging in several months ago? Get Canadian oil to alternative markets. We have 12 countries that showed up in the past 4 years begging us, not for a hydrogen, not for our AI, not for our trendy EV battery or buses or cars. They're past that foolishness. They came here for our oil and for our natural gas because they know we have a lot of it. We produce it to the highest ethical standards in the world. And I'm not tooting the Canadian horn because I'm a Canadian. These guys came to us saying, please give us some. We said, oh, there's no business case. I mean, if people are going to be as simplistic as voting for socks, sobbing, selfies, and if someone who walks around trying to pump up their CV by saying they were everything and all things to all people, I was upset. Mark Carney said he had something to do with the balancing the budget in 1998. Baloney, poppycock. That's not true. He could have great deals with Donald Trump in a very short period of time. Baloney, he never did. Had nothing to do with the 2008 global economic meltdown. That was Paul Martin and my old friend, who was my provincial counterpart before he became federal, the late Jim Flaherty, who had a lot to do with making sure the country didn't go off the rails. All that aside, I think Canadians need to recognize, and they have, by the way, the polls are finally showing that they want pipelines built, but it's too little, too late. And if you really want to stick it, Donald Trump, the only way you can do it is by saying, you don't want our market, you don't want our oil. We've got dozens of others that'll take it. China, Japan, South Korea, Indonesia. Emerging nations would take Canadian oil handily over us. Why? They have the refinery capacity. They have the upgraders. They can take these things. But we keep sitting here selling to the United States our natural gas for $2 an MMBTU. They're selling it to LNG because we said we're not going to build LNGs. We're going to block these things for the past 10 years. Now we're getting a couple done, too little, too late. Americans have 7. They're selling for $17 an MMBTU. I mean, what that really means is that we're giving Americans the feedstock. They're making the profit on it because we're not encumbered by net zero. What would I say to Canadians? Lose the fallacies of net zero, because what it's doing at the end of the day is leaving you with a lot less money. And the only thing it's winding up is net zero in your bank accounts and for generations to come.
Dan McTeague, thank you so much. I know you're busy. Everybody wants to talk to you. This is a really good sort of summation of where we're at. I hope that we can stay in touch with you as we work our way through this as Canadians. It is a little terrifying that we've put ourselves in this position. I couldn't agree with you more that we've put ourselves, and there is nothing wrong with trying to save the planet, but we can't be alone in it. We can't pay the price for it as Canadians. And the net results of net zero have only been negative to this point. It's tough to sell Canadians on it, I think, overall right now. Dan, where can people find out more about what you're up to and keeping an eye on affordable energy for us?
Yeah, president at affordableenergy.ca gets you directly to me. I do read my emails whenever they come in from time to time. Affordableenergy.ca. Look at the site. By the way, I'm putting up an article today about my take on Venezuela. I know it's only the third working day into the new year, but we've really had to, as it were, hit the ground running on this issue, because it does suggest that Canada is in a crisis moment. And it's not about going to Europe and going to other places around the world. We need to address this very quickly. And that's what you're going to find in some of the writings that I have leading up to this time. I'm rarely wrong on these things, only because, thank God, I've got the experience both in the private sector and the public sector to know what's going on. And having been to Venezuela, having been to Guyana, having worked in the United States, I mean, all of these things provide me an insight that tells me Canada can get it right, but it needs the leadership in this country to say, let's get on with building pipelines and let's nix net zero.
I'm with Dan McTagg. If you're in the media and you haven't interviewed him about this topic yet, I can't help you. He's the guy. Thank you so much, Dan. I appreciate it, and we'll see you next time.
Cheers, Mike. Looking forward to it again.